It's alive.
I'm like,
My kids like to say that, like, on the TV. They're like,
it's alive.
no, they're like, are we alive right now? Or is it a recording? No, it's alive.
It's alive. Well, last 2 weeks, because we didn't do a wet and why last week, but the week before when I did the green smoothie, I literally was like this. And then, like, we went live. I didn't know we were live, and I'm all, I have my Denise Richards face on, don't I? And Trevor's like, yep, you do. So, yeah, that's what I look like all the time, is I just walk around scowling. But it's fine. So welcome to the What and Why. Today we are going to talk about a lot of cool topics and some things that are kind of deep, and I'm going to share some experiences that I've had. We're going to talk about food, because all of us eat food. But before we get into our topic, I want to talk to you, Corey, about what has been going on with you. Like, what have you been up to? We weren't together last week, because both of us, as we'll talk about later, had a really crappy week last week in different realms. But what have you been up to? Like, what's new in the life of Dr. Bingham?
I'm healthy now, so that's nice. Oh, we
We have some people.
Turn the
I want to say
volume off.
hi. Corey, hi. Tight Body System. Hello, Tight Body System. Welcome to the What and Why show. See, this is why I like this.
Yep, so we got a double. So what happened with me this week? I finally got healthy. Got some things. I don't know. It's been kind of a crazy week. It's hard to like pin down just one thing, but one of the things that I'm almost excited about is I got over my cold. We had a whole flu thing go through our house, which I think has been going through the entire nation. But
yeah, there was a couple. We had Lurk's birthday party yesterday. Like half of our friends were sick, which was sad because they couldn't come. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better. So, anything else? How much snow did you guys get? So it snowed last
we had
night.
Snowmageddon.
Snowmageddon.
So we had like 8 or 10 inches yesterday, and then I woke up like another 4. I had to go shovel again before we took the kids to school this morning.
We should just do what we do, just don't shovel and make everyone that comes to our house walk in a bunch of snow.
Yeah, well, that's good too.
You know, my 69-year-old mother, I'm like, Mom, just shuffle. You'll be fine. She does a good job, though. She hasn't fallen yet. So we'll have Eli shovel. So that's good. I'm glad you're not sick anymore. Me, I'm just going to tell you about myself, even though you're not going to ask me.
So what about yourself? How was your week?
He never asks. He doesn't even care. It's like a one-sided relationship.
Well, you just, talk so much. I just figure it's going to come out anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. So last week for me was like pretty crappy as well. And I remember we were talking to Corey. I was talking to him. I.e. me. I was talking to Corey last week when we were going to film the What and Why. And both of us were just like, I remember calling you and I'm all, so, how are you? And he was just like, how are you? And I'm like, yep, you're in the same place I am. Like, neither one of us had any motivation. Well, I had gone to the doctor. I went to the doctor on Monday, and I couldn't get any of my pins and screws out because I'm still recovering from foot surgery. I'm still wearing this awful, it is so obtruse right now. Like, I just hate it.
It's black. It goes with everything.
That's why I'm wearing a black shirt. Coordinate with my surgical boot. But so, like, I couldn't get all my hardware out. And surprisingly, I was like amped up and I had all these plans, and then like it didn't happen, and then it literally spiraled. Like I was like in a pit for probably like 4 days. And so it was crazy. So my week wasn't the greatest, but it was fun because then Trevor we went out for Valentine's Day. Did you do anything for Valentine's Day?
We did dinner and a movie.
On Valentine's?
Friday.
I was going to say, you're brave if you went out on Valentine's Day.
No, because the kids were all still sick.
Yeah.
With the flu, everybody was down, and I asked my wife, I was like, hey, you want to make out? She's like,
did you have your smoker
no.
voice? Sometimes that's pretty attractive when you're
I
like...
kind of did, but I also had the smoker cough. So
yeah.
she was like,
She
no.
was like, get away from me.
No, but we went and saw what's his name? Black Panther.
Oh, was that
Friday.
good?
Yeah, it was really good.
Good review? I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah, so she was really excited. Because she told me a couple weeks ago, she's like, don't do anything for Valentine's because we're going to go out on Friday and see the movie. So
nice.
That's what we did. So it was a
Well,
lot of fun.
good. We have a couple more people that joined I wanted to say hello to. We have Lily Mora, 77, and I'm going to let you pronounce Tila.
Tilazaski?
Yeah, see, you're way better than I am. And then Martin, 777, and Gerald, hello, and then H. Kinney, Hinky, M. Hinkley. Sorry, Hinkley. I don't know you, but I just totally slaughtered your name. It happens to me all the time. People call me Daniel. I just have to deal with it. So I apologize. Thank you for joining us today. So I'm glad you're better. I am definitely better. I worked out this morning, and that was the first time I've worked out in like probably since Wednesday.
Okay.
No, Tuesday, since Tuesday. So we wanted to talk about emotional eating and addictions to sugar, because like,
yeah, so when you were in the pit, how did that affect your eating habits last
it's
week?
funny that you say that, because like I've been so strong. So I had surgery on January 4th. Been so strong. I was like dialed in. People brought me meals and I was so appreciative of it, and they were so sweet because they were all healthy. I was like, you guys, if you're gonna bring me meals, please make them healthy, because I can't work out. And like, so everyone was they were perfect. Everybody was so amazing. And I was doing really well. My nutrition was dialed in. But then I go to the doctor and I'm like leveled. No, you're not recovered yet. I was so ready to recover. And literally that next day, binge eating, like bad.
Mm-hmm.
Candy, cookies. Well, and here's the worst part. It's Trevor's fault. Everything's Trevor's fault. My husband is creating recipes and stuff for a bakery we're opening, like a dessert shop. So I had plenty of ammunition to support my emotional eating. I was like, chocolate chip cookies, sugar cookies. So yeah, but it was crazy, and that's kind of why I want to talk about this today, because I just went through that, and I know I'm not an anomaly. I know I've coached plenty of women, and our relationship with food, it goes from like being awesome to like literally damaging like just our spirit and like how we deal with life. And so, but yeah, I totally emotionally ate most of the week. And then you wake up the next day and you feel like a piece of crap. And you're like, I am the biggest waste of a human. All I ate yesterday was carbs and sugar. And then you want more, but you're depressed, and then you eat more and you're like, well, I'm not gonna work out because I screwed up, and I'm just gonna go hard today, get it all out of my system.
I've done that before.
And then wake up the next day and feel better. Well, it doesn't work that way. Like, you wake up the next day and it's just a cycle. It's a cycle. It's a vicious cycle. So
that's what happens when I open a bag of Oreos. I'm like, I'll just have one or two, and then like a week later the bag's gone. I was like, I thought I only had one or two.
And you're the only one that ate them in your
an hour.
house.
Yeah, only had one or two an hour.
Yeah, that's awful.
So yeah, I get those way too, because I don't know, especially after I've been eating well for a while, and I think this happens to a lot of people, and especially a lot of your girls too, is because when you're eating really well, you're doing awesome, but then you eat a little bit of sugar, and it just is like a downhill slope. And part of that is not totally your fault. Part of that is biochemistry, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit later.
Yeah.
But you get into this addictive cycle where the sugar just sabotages you. But it also helps your body create more dopamine, which is kind of a reward, and then also you create more serotonin, which is also a kind of a feel-good hormone. And that's why we kind of get stuck in this emotional eating. Is not totally emotional, but part of it is biochemical that feeds the emotion.
Yeah. So here's I love that you touched on the emotional eating. So I don't even know how to start this. So there I was, sitting on the couch. Trevor's coughing. My cameraman, will you please be quiet? He's currently recovering from being sick as well. So several years ago, I've been married before. And I'm in my last marriage, and I'm sitting on the couch, and it's like 11 o'clock at night, okay? And I just want to kind of paint a picture for you guys. So I'm sitting in my home on the couch. It's 11 o'clock at night. I have no idea where my husband's at. I have no idea. He doesn't return my calls. He hasn't come home from work. He's supposed to have been home a long time ago. And so I literally am sitting in this place where I'm emotionally distraught because I don't know what's going on with my life and my marriage at that point. And to this day, I cannot eat Girl Scout cookies. And I'll tell you why.
That's too bad.
Everyone loves it. So you have those Girl Scout cookies that come and they sell them, and everyone's so happy.
Yeah,
They're at the
cute
market.
little girl came to our door like 2 weeks ago, and
Yeah.
she's like, opened the door, and she's like, "Oh, we're selling. It's like today's the last day to sell Girl Scout cookies," and I'm like, "I need 2 boxes of Thin Mints because that's my kryptonite."
Yeah.
So, again, those will probably be gone as soon as they're open. Oh, I'm gonna have one or two.
1 hour.
1 hour, boom, they're gone. But yes, Girl Scout cookies. Good thing they only come around like once a year.
Once a year. So it's funny. So I never associated the emotional eating to the Girl Scout cookies until I started actually diving into my own emotional eating and what triggers certain things. And so I'm sitting on the couch, and I just had them delivered. So I had because my ex-husband at the time, we loved him. He had his flavors, I had mine. So we had 10 boxes. I had bought a lot of boxes. And so I remember sitting on the couch and I'm watching TV, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was so sad. I was literally, my heart was breaking because I didn't know where my husband was. And I'm sorry if I get emotional, but so I go into the pantry and I pull out, I think the first box box that I ate, the entire box that I ate was the peanut butter ones with the chocolate and the peanut butter in the middle. I don't know what they're called. So I'm sitting on the couch and I'm just starting to eat these cookies, and I started to kind of feel better. Like I'm eating and I'm feeling better, and I'm like, okay, I'm feeling okay, feeling better. But then like 12 o'clock comes around and he's still nowhere to be found. I can't find him. Literally, you guys, as I'm sitting there waiting for my husband to come home, like the emotional torment that I was going through, not knowing where he was, not knowing what was going to happen with my marriage, because at this point it was obvious that we were not doing very well. And before I knew it, I looked down and I literally had eaten 5 boxes of cookies.
5 boxes.
Yes, I'm not even kidding. And like I was so emotionally sick, I was physically sick. I don't know how I could fit that many. Like I tell people this story and they're like, there's no way. I can pack it away. You've seen me eat before. I can pack it away. But I remember sitting there and I just kept eating, and it was almost like I didn't even know what I was doing, but like the tears were coming and I was crying, and I'm like, then I got to the Thin Mints and those are really good. So I was like, these are good. And then I took some and I crushed them over ice cream, and I was eating ice cream with the cookies on top of it. And I look back now and I know now what I was going through was really hard. And I was trying to fill up the emptiness I felt with the food. And that started a cycle that I've found in my whole life. Like when I go through stressful moments, and sometimes I'll either go one direction or the other. I'll either just stop eating if I'm super stressed, or I'll like binge and eat to try to like fill up on a feeling. And so I wanted to talk about that today because that really impacted me. Because then after I woke up the next morning, like I felt pretty worthless already, because my husband really hadn't come home and I didn't know where he was, and at the time he wasn't, with me. He wasn't being faithful, and there was a lot of stuff going on in my life, and I turned to food to find comfort. And then at the same time, the food became my biggest enemy. So then I became like afraid of food because I couldn't control myself around it. And it was like this roller coaster of like, well, I'm gonna eat these cookies because I feel good when I'm eating, but then right when I was done, I went back to that pit of like, I'm the biggest piece of crap. No wonder no one wants to be with me. Like, I'm always gaining weight, I'm losing weight, I can never maintain it, I never feel good about myself, I'm not worthy, like all these emotions and this stuff tied to the food. And for a long time, I never had a healthy relationship with food. Honestly, for about a few years, I was really scared of food. And I didn't know how to eat, and I would get really nervous eating and going out and being around people and stuff like that. And so, but it's really crazy because how many times I wanted to ask you as a male, like, do men go through that? Because I know a lot of women go through emotional eating. Like we said, we try to comfort with food, chocolate. Did you guys turn to food? Like, is that something that you have experienced?
Yeah, I think in the past I've done that. Recently I like to eat chocolate.
It's comforting. Chocolate is a comfort food.
I go for the dark chocolate because the darker chocolate
supposed to be better for you.
It's supposed to have better. It's better for you. It's got more minerals and things like that. One of the things that I've noticed that with a lot of guys that I may have counseled with nutrition and things, that it's the same thing. I mean, it's the same hormones, but guys maybe don't admit it as much, and it's more acceptable, I think, for guys to kind of emotional eat or binge eat, because what it does is then they get this like big belly, and it's like, oh, it's like a hug from the inside. They're like, oh, I feel better. I got this big dad bod going on. Because they're like, oh, well, he's the dad. He can eat the cookies and the ice cream and all that stuff.
Oh, that is a whole nother topic. It's like okay for the dads to be overweight. It's not okay for the moms.
But one of the things that I've learned, and what is really interesting, when we're under a lot of stress, our body will use all these stress hormones to try and keep us going, like the adrenaline and norepinephrine and the cortisol and all these different things. Well, our body, once it uses all of those hormones, it needs to make more. And the raw materials for all of those hormones is fats and sugars. So what do we crave? Fats and sugars. So that's why when we eat those things, it's so, it tastes so good, but not only does it taste good, our body is using those raw materials to make new hormones to get ourselves balanced and to make us, feel better, so we don't feel so crazy.
So here's what's, I don't know, like, so do you ever binge eat? Have you binge eated? Have you binge eated before?
Binge eaten?
Have you ever been a binge eater?
I did in high school once.
Well, you wrestled in high school, right?
Yeah, so that really threw off my whole like.
So what was your
Story
relationship like
with-
with food in
with
high school
Cory.
when you were wrestling?
So when I went through wrestling, I did it fairly well. I didn't go like spit every hour in a cup like some people would do to make weight, but I would be very restrictive on what I ate. And then when I wasn't needing to be restrictive, then I was like, I'm going to eat everything. Plus, it also changed the way that I look at food as far as the value. So even like, food that I know that wasn't healthy for me, like I couldn't stand it to go to waste. And so I would eat everything on my plate, and then like I would eat stuff on other people's plates. And not that I really gained a lot of weight from that, but it was something that like for me, like I couldn't waste food like ever. And so I always just had to do all that, and it, it created like, I don't know, maybe it was kind of like a void emotionally as well, because like, oh, you can't waste the food because there are wrestlers that are going hungry. I know everybody's like, oh, there's kids in China that are starving, or there's kids in Africa. I was like,
No,
well, you could
there's
ship them.
wrestlers.
You could ship them the food, but it's going to be bad by the time you get there. So that concept.
I remember having that conversation with my parents,
It's like, it
when
doesn't
my
make
mom would say
sense,
that,
you know,
like,
you
well, just
can't-
send them my food.
Just send them my food. But for me, it was really weird because I went through that time where I had deprived myself of food for a while, and so food became like really, I don't know, had a high value, even if it wasn't nutritious at the time.
Yeah.
This was before I knew a lot of, well, that's good and that's bad. You don't need to eat that, but maybe eat more of this kind of a thing.
Well, what's crazy, so just yesterday, I'm currently coaching women right now, and on our accountability call, we do coaching and calls, and just last night, we were talking about our relationship with food. And I was talking to one of my clients, and she had expressed to me that like she doesn't really crave sweets anymore. We've already gone through about a month of the program, and we've been eating healthy and alkaline and limiting our sugar intake and dairy. And she was expressing like through that Valentine's Day, where normally in the past she would just like binge and like no treats could go to waste. It was like she didn't want any candy going to waste, and so she would just eat it, and which I think is totally normal. I think all of us do that. I do that. I'm like, oh, there's chocolate. I don't want these Hershey Kisses to go to waste.
Yeah, so
I
then
can't
you
just
think,
throw them away. I need to eat
tomorrow,
them.
I'm going to start my quote diet.
Yeah.
So I need to like eat all the bad stuff today.
Yeah.
Like I've done that.
Yeah, but she said that as she has been eating healthy, she didn't have the desire as much to overindulge. Like she could have a little bit of treats, a little bit of sweets, and then she was like good. So you mentioned earlier about like the sugar and the addiction and the dopamine and stuff. Like, can you just briefly talk to us about like, because I teach about sugar, and for a long time, I think sugar is like this drug that people don't really realize it's a drug. So tell us about sugar and why, like kind of what we talked about earlier, like why can we not ever get enough sugar? Like what does it do?
Well, it is a stimulant in the brain. So we have different receptors all over our brain that when we eat something that we like, and sugar in all of its forms stimulate these dopamine receptors. What they'll do is they get into this part of the brain called the accumbens. I can't remember. It's something accumbens in your brain.
Okay,
So
that
sometimes
works.
even I forget stuff. So it's the reward center of your brain. That's the
That's a better
scientific
term.
name for it. So what the sugar does is when it gets in there is it stimulates that area, and you produce dopamine because you like it, and so it's a reward for you. And what your body wants to do and what your brain tries to do is to recreate those rewards. And when you eat healthy foods, you actually get the same type of reward. So when you go out and you have like, oh, this really great, nutritious dinner, you're like, oh, that was so great and yummy, then you want to, have it again. You can have it again and you'll get, another reward. But if you eat that healthy dinner too often, the dopamine actually gets reduced in the brain. So it's like, hey, that was really good, but it's a way that our body is trying to get us to eat more of a variety of foods, even if it's healthy. But when we eat a lot of sugar, it doesn't ever have that effect. Like the sugar, when it triggers those dopamine effects, it never gets dampened. And so, not naturally. And so what the brain also does is after about 3 weeks, it will try and dampen it naturally, because it's like you keep eating all this sugar and it's not healthy to have, all this dopamine response going on. So it will actually reduce the number of dopamine receptors in the brain. And so then you need more sugar to get that same high response, so to speak.
Mhm.
It's the same way with drugs. When you first start doing, drugs and things like that, in the beginning you get like this high, and then you don't get as much high with the same amount, and so that's why you have to do more and more and more. And sugars, it affects the brain the same way. So sure, sugar is healthier than heroin, obviously, but in the brain, it's affecting those dopamine
triggered the same.
and triggers the same way. So, but the thing with sugar that other foods don't do, the sugar does, is it continues to have that high dopamine response, whereas the other foods the body kind of dampens down because it wants you to have a variety. But because of the sugar molecule, the way it is, it's always triggering that dopamine, which then you get that craving, you get addicted. Then when you try and reduce the sugar, then you go through withdrawal symptoms.
Mhm.
And a lot of people don't recognize the withdrawal symptoms if they're on sugar versus if they're on like drugs or caffeine or the other things. You're like, oh, I'm gonna quit doing this, and then they go through these withdrawal symptoms, and they're like, oh, well, that's related to the heroin that they're going off of. However, when people try and go healthy, they still will have some withdrawal symptoms. They're just not recognizing that is just sugar withdrawal symptoms, and it's something that they can push through, and it's a healthy thing.
Well, that's one thing I thought was really interesting, that when just what you just said, how you eat healthy and you have to like always switch it up. So like I'm a creature of habit, so I will eat the same thing literally like over and over and over and over. The same green smoothie recipe, the same snacks, the same lunches. I rotate through certain dinners, and like you said that, and it kind of like, I was like, oh, well that makes sense, because I go really good for like a while, but then it's like I kind of like always dip.
And you're
it's
like,
like,
man, this isn't as good as I remember.
yeah, and in that dip, it must be the body just saying, hey, shake it up a little bit. But like with sugar and with like any kind of, the word dopamine is just really cool. But like sugar, that doesn't happen, right? Like I continually eat sugar or
You're
5
always
boxes
getting-
of Girl Scout cookies, and what I thought, another thing you said that was really interesting too was that the sugar, like you just have to keep eating more. So it really is like a drug. Like I think a lot of people don't understand that sugar is like a drug. Not like after so many bites, you don't even taste it the same. Like
Yeah.
'Cause
Well, it's part of that addiction part of your brain. So if you ever talk to an alcoholic, once someone gets that far in and their brain becomes addicted to that and they become an alcoholic, they'll say, well, you're an alcoholic for life. So because once you have that drink, even if you haven't had a drink for like 5 years, and then they have that one more drink, it just triggers everything back to where it was before.
Mm-hmm.
Similar with sugar, because it's working in the same area of the brain. So even though it's not quite as triggering as some of that, it still affects the brain the same way. So that's why you still have to be a little cautious not to overindulge, because then you will trigger those cravings again.
Yeah. Well, and I like to so we talked a lot about sugar and the addiction that sugar has. And so I think it's just really important to just remember that it is an addictive thing, and there's a reason why we have to always compound to get the same effect from it. And here's another thing that I thought was really cool was, I just lost my train of thought.
Choo-choo. Lost the train.
I don't even know where I was going.
Well, while you're thinking about that, let me give you a couple of pointers to
Okay,
get off
do that. I'm gonna try to figure out
get
where my
off the
brain
sugar
went.
craving, because it is partly a biochemical craving. It is an emotional craving. One of the things that creates the biochemical craving is the dysregulation that is happening in your bloodstream with sugar and insulin. So there's 3 things that you can add to your diet or to your meals that help balance the blood sugar. So that's going to be healthy fats. So that's like nuts, avocados, coconut oil, those kind of things. Eating some good quality protein, and then eating more fiber in your meals. And what that's going to do is stabilize your blood sugar so that you don't have these sugar cravings, because the sugar cravings may have been coming from spikes in insulin. So the insulin that's going up and down. So when you get that blood sugar regulated, then those spikes in insulin get regulated, and then you can start to have more balanced meals, and you're going to have less cravings, and you won't be as addicted to sugar.
Yeah, so that's good. Thank you, because I was hoping we would touch on some ways to help the problem, not just talk about the problem, but I always want to give what we know about how to help the problem. So I figured out what I was going to say. So here's what's cool about, not cool, but with food and associations with food. So I know for a long time I had certain associations with certain foods. Like I talked earlier about like Girl Scout cookies, I couldn't ever eat them again because I was associating the heartache and all of the emotions I was feeling with the Girl Scout cookies. Well, the same thing can be applied to, like if you think about what is food, like what's food for? Like other than nourishing our bodies, like what is food for? It's for like comfort, it's for like sedating. Like a lot of people, like we sedate with food and we sedate and we want to like fill a void. I know my husband travels for work, and about 3 years ago we were in the height of our events and he was gone a lot, and those, like I put the kids to bed and I would be like, okay, now it's like my time, but I was like lonely and I didn't really know what to do with my time. I'm not a huge TV watcher, but I literally would like find myself in the pantry just looking for anything to eat because I was like lonely. And I would get my bowl of ice cream or cereal or whatever thing I could find. It was usually ice cream. My go-tos were ice cream, cold cereal, or cookies. Like just it was junk food. It was always junk food. It was never like, hey, I'm gonna eat some carrots. Well, yeah, like I was like, I was like looking at my pantry going, I probably should pick something healthy, but I never wanted that. And it was because I was trying to fill up the void that I felt when my husband was out of town and gone.
Well, subconsciously, you knew that if you ate those foods, you were going to get a spike and you were going to feel better.
And I did feel better for a little bit, and then but it always backfired, and then I'd be like, why do I do this to myself? And so I want to challenge any of you out there who watch this and who are listening right now. I want you to look at your relationship with food. And I want you to see, like across the board, what do you use food for? And there might be some like normal foods you go to where if you're trying to hit those fitness goals and you're trying to like eat healthy, but then we always have those moments where like I go to the doctor and I'm slammed to the ground like, nope, you're not recovered yet. I had all these plans this week to like last week. None of it happened. You get sick and knocked on your butt. And it's like, and especially when I'm sick too, I always crave like junk. Like I never want to eat really good food. And so I think that's the body's way of just trying to like emotionally feel better. And so I want you guys to think about like, what is your relationship with food? I know for a long time with me, I would think of like chips and queso. It always was associated with like football parties, like and fun times. And like I think of like popcorn, and I would think of like movie theaters and like fun things to go to, and like so all of that is associated. And what happened with me is I wanted to change my story about food, and I wanted to change my relationship with food. And so I had to like dive into what my relationship was, and it was accepting and realizing and becoming aware that I used food to comfort, and I used food to fill up on a feeling and fill a hole that I felt. And I also became afraid of food because I didn't know how to use it in a productive way, to where I couldn't even go to a football party because I was so afraid of overeating while I was there because I couldn't control myself. And so once we identify the emotional attachment we have to food and we decide to let go of it and find that emotional fill it up somewhere else, then we can actually recover, and we can stop binge eating, we can stop like searching out those comfort foods, we can stop sedating through food and find a more productive way to do it. And for me, a lot of it was eating healthier and identifying that my body is my friend and not my enemy, and that I am worth something. And in the moments where I don't feel like I'm worth anything and a lot of those emotions come back, that's where I find myself going to food and going to old habits and patterns. And so with our relationships with food, like it's real. Like I have a dear client, when we did this exercise in my program, we did this exercise, and it's a pretty in-depth program we go through on identifying what is your relationship with food. And it was fun because she went through all the questions of like, what is food? How do you use food as a sedation? And we dive into even childhood memories. And she came to me, and it was so fun because she's like, Danielle, I realized that I'm like a food hoarder, because when I was younger, we didn't have a lot of food. And so and this kind of reminds me of when you were talking about your wrestling, like when you couldn't let anything go to waste. I remember growing up and we heard, finish everything on your plate. You cannot leave the table until your plate is full. And so from a really young age, I feel like a lot of people are taught to overeat, and we don't really recognize what it's like to have a healthy portion. And so for me, a long time, like I would pile on my plate and I would eat, even if I was done, I would still keep eating because I was like, no, I've got to finish this plate or I'm going to be in trouble. I won't be able to get out, even as an adult.
For the kids, for this hungry.
Seriously. And then I found I was doing it to my own children, and I'm like, no, you will finish everything on your plate, young man. And he's like, but I'm so full. And I'm like, bull crap. And I'm like, but I look at his plate and he's like 10. And I'm like, finish your food. And so and when I did this and I became aware of how I function with food, I was like, what am I teaching my children? And I think every parent does the best they can. Like, there's no parent out there that's like trying to sabotage their children.
Well, it makes sense. Like, oh, finish your food. However, it's you don't want to like set up an emotional something
barrier there already. And so I found, like, with Lyric, when I had her and Eli, he's much older, and so the poor thing, like, I learned so much through him. Sorry, bud. But I like saw that I was teaching her those same habits, and I was like, no, you finish your food. And she would tell me she's full. And I know with toddlers sometimes they're like, I'm full, and I'm like, you've had one piece of broccoli. You are not full. Eat your food. But like, there's where they get to where you can see they've eaten, and you're like, okay, they might be full. Like, their tummies are just little. So I would ask her, is your tummy telling you she's full? Are you good? Like, I wanted her to identify the feeling of being full and being able to just be done eating and have a good relationship with food. And I feel like the more we become aware, and if we fix our relationships with food and identify that, yes, there's emotions attached, and there's sedations that happen, and it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to acknowledge it and to become aware, because in that moment is when you get to fix it and you get to move forward and through it. And so if you're watching this and you're listening right now, I want you to ask yourself right now, what is your relationship with food? And I want you to like dive into experiences of when you've sabotaged or when you've fallen off the bandwagon and you're not eating right anymore. Like, why? Like, find the root of it, because when we find the root of why we're doing what we're doing, we're able to pull it out. Like, I always tell my girls, it's like a weed. Like, if we just chop the weed off with a weed eater, what happens the next day?
It just keeps growing.
Pisses me off. Like, we do yard work and I just pull it off, like, Mom, I'm done. Literally, she'd come out the next day and be like, you didn't do anything. There's like so many weeds back, and I'm all crap. But it's like, that's how emotions are, and that's how experiences are, and that's how the tie to food and any kind of experience we have that affects us long term or affects how we are as people, it all comes from a root. There's a root to all of our emotional behavior, and food is a huge one for me. And I know, like I had to process Girl Scout cookies. This might sound so silly, but like, I had to run through a process to release the emotional attachment I had on Girl Scout cookies. Because I'm not even lying, 2 years ago, one of my dearest friends bought me some and brought me some, and I was like physically sick with these cookies, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like, and I was like sad, and I got all depressed, like all these emotions started surfacing, and I couldn't figure out why. I'm like, I'm happily married right now. I'm like so happy, and I'm doing really well. Why am I feeling all these things again? And it's because I had attached so much emotion to that particular food from what it did to me, for me, with me in that experience. But once I release all that, like, it doesn't affect me anymore, and I can kind of move through it. And so that's like basically relationships with food it's real. And like reiterate your, like, what was it, 3 things you said on how to maintain, like how to stop, what are some keys on the stop? Yeah, to break the cycle.
So eating more balanced, you're gonna have more your healthy fats, your proteins, and then your fibers, because that's gonna help stabilize your blood sugar. Some other things that help really well is chromium. That stabilizes your blood sugar.
What is chromium, a supplement?
Chromium's a vitamin, it's a supplement.
Okay.
Doing a B vitamin, like a B complex, especially in the afternoon, can really help some of those cravings, because that's when a lot of those hit, is later in the afternoon. So if you do a B vitamin, B complex, then that helps with those as well. So that can help, reduce some of the cravings. And then think about one of the other things that I always tell people, that when they're craving a lot of sugar, is they need more vitamin C, because 200 years ago, people would get the same type of cravings, and they were craving something sweet. Well, what is something sweet? It's fruit.
Yeah.
So what does fruit have a ton of? It has a lot of vitamin C and a lot of B vitamins. So now when we have those cravings, they're like, oh, I want like a handful of M&Ms.
Candy bar, yeah.
But if you throw a handful of vitamin C instead, I've noticed when I do that, my sugar cravings like totally just tank, and they go away, almost completely, just because my body was actually just craving nutrients, not sugars.
That's so cool that you said that, because a couple years ago I was ready for a photo shoot, and like, I love candy, you guys. I'm addicted to candy. Like, it is one of my vices, and it's okay. But I remember I was trying to like just be super clean for a couple months to get ready for this photo shoot, and I used the cuties. Like, when I wanted something sweet, I would just peel a little tiny orange and pop it in my mouth, and like, it became like candy for me, because it was so sweet.
So you can find, so another thing too is just use the substitution. So instead of doing candy, you can do like nuts, or get trail mix, because it's got some maybe coconut in it, that's got some sweet foods. So use fruits or other things.
Yeah, well, because that's another thing I love that you just touched on, because the brain, like the brain's job is to find what we're thinking about. It's like manifest what we want. And so if I'm always saying I can't have candy, it's gonna do nothing but want candy, because all I'm thinking about is I can't have candy. Or if you're like trying to like give up cake, so like one thing you can do is just replace it instead of having to take everything cold turkey or cut everything completely out, which is where we lose momentum and we lose, you know, it's really hard. But if we replace it with something and then just take baby steps to get to where we ultimately want to go, instead of just doing, like I'm an A to Z girl. Like it's hard for me to go A and then B and then C and then D. And so then by D, I'm like, well, screw this isn't working. I'm done. Like this is so stupid. But if I actually take, okay, well today I'm gonna have cuties as my treat, and I keep doing that, before I know it, in like a week, I've eliminated most of my candy and most of my sugar intake, and I feel better. And it's overall really good, because the brain wants what we continually think about, like it's trying to find it and support that thought. So if we can shift the mindset to support the physicality goals that we have, it will also help accomplish that too.
That's true.
Well, this was a fun little chitty chat, and now you know, you can buy me Girl Scout cookies, I just won't eat them. But I don't cry when they come to my house anymore. So,
more for me then.
Yeah, I'll give them to you. I'll buy the Thin Mints and give them to you. Trevor might fight you for them. Well, that's all we have today for the What and Why. Thanks for joining us, you guys, and
See you until next time.
Until next time. But head over to ironbutterflyfitness.com for more nutritional information, at-home workouts, and there's also daily downloads on there. There's also, if you want to watch any of our other podcasts on the What and Why, we've got numerous topics on healthy fats. We've covered, what else did we do? Green smoothies. We did supplements, organic versus non-organic. So all those past episodes, everything we've done is already on the membership site. Head over there, it's free. All that content is for you and to help you achieve the goals that you have. So thank you again for joining us. Remember, head over to ironbutterflyfitness.com right now. We'll catch you on the other side.